We got a major Brian Flores update to dive into on today's show. Coming in from Mike Florio. Welcome in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman. So this is what Mike Florio had to say on Brian Flores and his current contract negotiations with the Minnesota Vikings, saying per a source with knowledge of the situation, the Vikings are currently working toward extending his deal. The Vikings wanted to do it before the 2025 regular season. Flores decided to wait. If he was betting on himself, he won. And there's no doubt. Like, if Flores was betting on himself, he definitely won because the Vikings defense has had an amazing season. The hype around Brian Flores is massive. I think his stock from week 1 of the season to where it is right now has completely skyrocketed. I mean, the Vikings, in my opinion, have a top 5 unit in the league, especially over the last 2 months. They have been playing some elite football. I mean, 1 passing touchdown over the last 7 weeks of the season. That's all credit going to Brian Flores. But if he was betting on himself in terms of having another team come in this offseason, throw him the bag where it puts the Wilfs in a tough position where are they going to want to make Flores the highest paid coordinator in the league? Well, it obviously worked out because we're already getting this report coming in from Mike Florio as well, saying the Cowboys will be firmly in play for Brian Flores. Now, I might call BS on this. Now, I think the Cowboys would definitely have some interest in Brian Flores, but I could also see Flores and his agent maybe putting this information out there to Mike Florio just to drive the price up. I mean, we have seen players do this over the last 20 years in the NFL. We're saying, oh, Dallas has a lot of interest in, my client, for example, just to drive the price up and for that player to inevitably return to their previous organization. So maybe the same thing's being done here with the Cowboys and the Vikings and Brian Flores, but this is what Mike Florio had to say, saying if Jones, talking about Jerry Jones, decides to give true credence to his periodic claim about the size of the check he'd write to win a Super Bowl, he'll put real cash on the table, which could spark a bidding war for Flores between Dallas, Minnesota, and whoever else may decide to try to hire him. And, that's why I say I think Flores played his cards perfectly here. I mean, I don't think it was risky by any means for Flores to not play this year on a contract because it would have to take a disaster for the Vikings, I think, to not bring him back. But he played his cards perfectly here. He's going to have Jerry Jones coming off a year where the Cowboys have had a historically bad defense. He's obviously, up there in age. He's probably thinking like, man, I only have a couple more years left. I'm going to go try to toss a bag at one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. And then that puts the Vikings in a tough spot because the Vikings situation where it's like, we're already paying Kevin O'Connell $15+ million per year. Are we going to make Brian Flores? Are we going to make him the highest paid coordinator in NFL history, giving him $7, $8, possibly $10 million per year, considering the Wilfs aren't the most cash-rich ownership group in the NFL, puts them in the tricky situation. But also, Florio had this to say, saying the other factor in all of this is whether the Vikings truly want Flores back or whether they want to create the impression that they tried to keep him. As we learned when canvassing high-level personnel with multiple teams about Flores' head coaching prospects in the coming hiring cycle, his Belichickian style hasn't always meshed with Minnesota nice. If the Vikings organization and the Wolves specifically let Brian Flores walk, the Wolves should flat out be forced to sell the team. His Belichickian style could be the reason why they don't want to bring him back. This is the same BS that this ownership group played out when Jim Harbaugh wanted to become the coach of the Minnesota Vikings. He was too, out of pocket. He was too, out of the mainstream. He kind of, didn't always go with like the trends and everything. He's just a very out there person, and it came out that that's why the ownership group didn't want to hire Jim Harbaugh. And now if you're going to apply the same thing for Brian Flores, considering all the success he has already had at your organization, I mean, I would be serious. The Wolves should be forced to sell the team because that would be a complete joke. So we'll talk about this more. But if you guys want the Vikings to keep Flores, give me a flow down below in the comments section. Listen, Brian Flores, I love his defense. I love everything he's about. And hopefully the Vikings can keep him here in Minnesota. So if you guys want the Vikes to keep Flores, give me a flow down below. This is also interesting coming from Florio. A lot of Florios, a lot of flows on today's show. But this is what he had to say, saying still, Coach Kevin O'Connell will or should have plenty of say in the final decision as to how much the Vikings will pay to keep Flores. That's interesting. But given O'Connell's gentler touch when it comes to working with others, Flores provides balance And if/when the Vikings get their quarterback position figured out, the upside in Minnesota could be higher than it is in Dallas. Now, I would guess Kevin O'Connell wants to keep Brian Flores. I mean, I think we can all assume that. But also the point being that, like, Kevin O'Connell is going to have a say in how much they should pay Brian Flores. I don't think KOC should have a say at all. That should be just the Wilfs. If the Wilfs want to keep Brian Flores, if they want to give him $10 million, they can do that without Kevin O'Connell's approval, because I could also make an argument that Brian Flores is a better flat-out coach than Kevin O'Connell is. But I also do agree with Florio on the second half of that quote, saying I think the upside in Minnesota would be higher than it is in Dallas, because the Vikings, like, the combination of Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores, I mean, that's a Super Bowl caliber head coach and defensive coordinator combo. Like, even though this season has been a disaster, free agency not going the way we planned, like Hargrave, Allen, Kelly, Fries, those guys really not working out. Like, I think the coaching staff this year, keeping these guys engaged. I mean, the Packers are resting their starters next week. The Vikings are probably going to be 9-8 in a disastrous season, which is a credit to the organization and a credit to the coaching staff, where it's like, yeah, this was a season from hell. Fans are furious. We still were 9-8. I mean, there are other fan bases in the NFL. There are other teams in the NFL, organizations in the NFL that would pray for a 9-8 season, and that was a disaster for Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. So I think that kind of speaks to the standard they set and just really how good they are as coaches. But, I mean, Flores will probably get around $7-8 million per year, I would assume. I would just be very, very shocked if the Vikings play this all out and it's not like they don't have a $10 million offer for Brian Flores when it's all said and done. Now, I do think this is a little bit of a gamesmanship between Flores and his agent and his camp, kind of going back with, the Minnesota Vikings and all that. But, we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But here are the highest paid coordinators in the league. Chip Kelly, 6. Vic Fangio, 4.5. Steve Spagnuolo, 3.5. Todd Monken, 3. Mike Kafka, 3 as well. Now, we'll dive more into this here in a second, but if you guys could hit that subscribe button. We are taking on the Packers Report channel in our Week 18 sub battle. So if you guys haven't hit that subscribe button just yet, go down there, change it, subscribe to the channel today. Once you guys are subscribed, just give me a SKOL down below. All right, we'll get to more around Flores here and why the Vikings defense could take a step back. But today's episode is brought to you guys by Prize Picks. It is the holiday season and the best time of year for sports. You have bowl games, basketball and football matchups, playoff pushes. It is all happening at once. And when you and I are out here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what to eat, which game to watch, there's one place where it feels good to be right, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. And if you guys get your picks right, you could cash in. And Prize Picks, they have a new feature called Early Payouts. So if your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. It's also super simple to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you guys get your picks right, you could cash in. So download the Prize Picks app today, plug in that promo code CLNS, get hooked up with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. But shout out to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, I think there's no doubt about it that the Vikings defense would take a massive step back if Flores is not there. Now, I think Flores, with how unique his scheme is and how much he challenges the quarterback just on the processing side of the game, and then also I think that's the underrated part of Flores' defense is, obviously the processing side of the game. Like, that's step one on trying to crack the code to just being successful play after play after play. But then you ask the quarterback to deliver big-time throws with pressure right in his face over and over again. Like, we saw that especially with Goff back on Christmas where, even when he would have his protection all good, he would have everybody in the right spot, then it's still, you got Harrison Smith barreling down on you. You still got to step into a throw and be deadly accurate because the coverage on the back end is so sticky, so confusing. It just causes quarterbacks to literally play A-plus level football. And the Vikings, if you take that away from you, take that scheme away, I don't know if the personnel could carry this defense to maintain that, high production, because the personnel, in my opinion, is just average. Harrison Smith probably won't be there next year. I think Andrew Van Ginkel's a hell of a player, but he's at his best self when he is with Brian Flores. I think Grenard, he could work anywhere, but I think he's at his best self with Brian Flores. Now, I also think there's a chance that Grenard ends up getting traded this offseason. That's another story for a different day, but Brian Flores, if the Vikings were to have to lose him, you have some good names out there. it's not like this is a bad defensive coordinator cycle. Like, even if it's worst case scenario, we lose Flores, like, I think it would be obviously catastrophic. And I think we would see this defense take a serious step back, but there are some good replacements out there. You got a guy like Al Harris, DB coach for the Chicago Bears. They're obviously having a great year in terms of taking away the football. He was also the guy back with the Dallas Cowboys with Trayvon Diggs, Ron Bland when they were having their high interception seasons. Maybe you kind of go the same route of Flores, where you get a guy like Raheem Morris, a head coach that was fired. You could bring him in. Same with Jonathan Gannon. And then you also got a Jim Schwartz and a Jim Leonard out there. Like, all five of these guys are solid options if you are to lose Flores. But the thing is about Flores, there's nobody like him. Like, he is the best defensive coordinator in the National Football League. His scheme is unique. It would just be very, very tough for the Vikings to replace him somehow. So hopefully the Wilfs, they pony up the money. They're able to get this done. I would still have some confidence he'll be back as the DC. But again, what if a team just makes him the head coach? Then there's really nothing the Vikings can do. But that's update on today's show from Mike Florio. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. If you guys could, hit me with a SKOL down below in the comment section, and we'll get on out of here. As always, SKOL Vikes.